Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave and this is episode 1768 and today's date is January 17th, 2019, and the title of the episode is, If You Look Closely, You Can See the Plan to Reset the System. Now, before I get started, I want you to take a look at this. This is a coin that everyone is raving about. It's a Morgan silver dollar, a runaway success in its day and about to do the same now. It's the superstar of the collectible world. One sold for $587,500 not so long ago. Once you start and get the collecting bug, you'll be dreaming of these in your sleep. Discover the thrill, pleasure, and joy of unearthing these rare coins. Noble Gold can start you off with one of their specially selected collector's choice coins. Take the first steps to a lucrative and absorbing hobby and go to historicsilvercoins.com and save $5 per coin by using the code X22 today. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, we've been talking about the plan to reset the system. And when we talk about resetting the system, it's just not about getting rid of those people in power, resetting the economic system. It's about resetting the system globally. And we're already starting to see this happen. If we look out into the European area, we see the yellow vests, we see the BREXIT, we see those leaders that are in power right now. They're not running for re-election. Many of the leaders are canceling Davos, which I'll get into in just a moment. And we're starting to see that there's a movement right now, an awakening. And if we go back to Q, this is what it was all about, waking up the people. And this is just not an awakening here in the United States. It's an awakening around the world. Everyone is starting to realize and understand what these deep state elite central bankers were planning, and they're not going along with it. Now, we can see out in the UK, the Brexit was the first step. Let's get rid of the EU. We don't want them involved in our country. Let's separate ourselves. So the UK went ahead and they had a referendum. And they decided, okay, look, we want a complete break from the EU. This is what we voted for. Now, May, she's been working on this plan for a very long time, and she came up with a plan that does not benefit the people of the UK. It benefits the EU. And from this point, we can see that her plan did not pass. Now, the EU is saying that they are willing to give her more time. They'll extend the time, but they're not going to change the deal. Now, again, this puts us into limbo where there is no Brexit. This might be part of the plan. We talked about this before. We also understand that during this time that she's going to try to push her plan forward. Most likely, this is not going to work because we saw how the vote was. It was completely against her plan. Now, since the globalist system is falling apart, a lot of leaders decided they weren't going to be going to Davos. Trump could care less about Davos. He said, because of the shutdown, I'm not going to Davos. Macron, he is busy dealing with the yellow vest right now. And now Theresa May is out there saying, well, I'm going to have to cancel my trip to the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos because I need to fix what's happening here in the UK. I need to keep the globalist system together. Macron is in France trying to keep the globalist system together. And all these leaders right now, they're trying to keep the globalist system together, which means this tells you there is a natural movement happening right now. And we know that the central banks are behind stopping this Brexit. For instance, the IMF, they came out and said, listen, a no-deal Brexit is biggest risk to Britain's economy. So if there's a no deal, their economy might fail. If there's a referendum, you're going to see chaos. We didn't see it. And by the way, if there's a no-deal Brexit and they just break clean and free away from the EU is the one that loses. They're having a problem, not the UK. The EU, which is filled with non-elected leaders, their entire plan of a one currency, one world government of non-elected leaders is completely falling apart right now. Why do you think Germany and France are looking to merge their infrastructure, their economy? Because they're trying to save this globalist system, and it's falling apart very, very quickly. Now, something very interesting. Since we're in this shutdown, we know there's a lot of things not happening right now, and we'll be talking about a lot of that in the next report. But what's interesting is that Canada was out there, and they're saying that they cannot report their trade data because of the U.S. shutdown. Really? So they don't know what their trade data is if the United States is shut down. It turns out Canada is entirely reliant on the U.S. for its trade data. Each country has been using the other's import data to produce its export statistics since 1990. U.S. imports from Canada reported to U.S. Customs and Border Protection are compiled by the U.S. Census Bureau and sent to Statistics Canada to be used as statistics for Canada's exports to the United States. Kind of odd. But what we're watching right now is the complete reset of the economic system. And this is the globalist, the elite, the central banks. To push this agenda forward, what has to happen? Now, out of Final Wake Up Call, this individual kind of lays out what they think is going to happen here. And let me read part of this to you. No real change can manifest in the economic prison nations until the fake debt owed to the central banks and all other banks is defaulted on. These banks have to be audited, and all assets belonging to the nations have to be taken back from the people running this fraudulent scheme that has continuously entrapped people in fake wars and debt. It will take great care to investigate, audit, and gain full control of the monetary system that is owned by a private corporation and its central banks throughout the world. A complete audit of all the gold holdings of all central banks will need to be coordinated simultaneously because this gold is property of the populace. Once the central banks are audited and all their assets frozen by the respective treasury departments, it is recommended that the U.S. and other corporate nations default on their debt to its corrupt private owners. The plan is that the Fed and central banks will declare bankruptcy, and the respective treasuries will, on behalf of the citizens, seize all assets of the Federal Reserve and all the other central banks. All these trillions in debt will either be dropped in the bankruptcy, or the respective government's treasury can print useless fiat currency to pay the debt off. It is important to understand that ending the central banks will not crash the currency, bond, or stock markets. All three of those are controlled currently by the Exchange Stabilization Fund through backdoor trading done by the ESF and the U.S. Treasury. It has been proven that the ESF controls all three free markets. Eventually, Trump can end the U.S. fiat currency and create a new currency with a basket of commodities to back it up, including gold, silver, other precious metals, and commodities. The old Federal Reserve notes will become useless after a recall of old currency that weeds out money that has not been taxed by keeping it in offshore accounts and tax havens. This action will immediately eradicate all offshore tax haven money, illegal drug money, stolen and laundered money, and currency held by foreign nations that has been siphoned out of countries illegally. The new currency will be established after the hidden CIA gold and assets have been audited and seized by the U.S. Treasury. Now, we do understand that Q has told us that gold will bring down the Fed. We will be seeing a restructuring, and we can see how this could actually play out. We know there's an audit the Fed bill waiting in the wings. We also know there's an abolish an IRS bill, H.R. 24 and H.R. 25, for audit the Fed and abolish the IRS. They're just waiting in the wings. And we can see Trump continually contradicting the Fed over and over and over again, pointing the finger every time they raise rates, saying they're the ones who are destroying the stock market. They're the ones who are bringing down the economy. They are the biggest threat to the economy. And he's letting everyone know that they will be responsible. Now, if we look around the world, we can see that this movement is not just here in the United States. Yes, the people have to come up to speed here in the U.S., but out in the other countries where there's a central bank giving each one of these countries funds, people are hurting out there. They feel the austerity. They feel what it feels like not to have a job. They understand that it's not going to get better, and they're fed up. And you can see out in France with the yellow vests, you can see it out in the UK, that people are now speaking out. Now, of course, the corporate media, they're not going to be talking about any of this stuff. The mainstream media stays very, very quiet. They don't want other people to catch on to what they're doing, so they decide to not report any of this. But the movement is spreading. You don't need the mainstream media to spread this. If it's a real movement where people around the world feel the same way, where people understand that it's the elite, it's the central banks, it's the deep state, and they want change, you're going to have people coming together. And word will spread, as we can see it happening right now. We are in the beginning stages. Usually in the beginning stages, it is complete chaos. And this has happened throughout history many, many times. We are in the chaos stage where the old guard is still trying to keep control of the population. They're trying to control the population, and they will use force on the population. The only problem is the old guard doesn't understand that their days are numbered. The number of people, well, they outnumber the old guard. And once more and more people catch on to this, this is when we have change. It has begun in the United States. It's happening throughout Europe. This is spreading, and it will continue to spread. If you notice, the yellow vests decided to attack the banks, the central banks, by trying to withdraw their funds. This is just the beginning. Once people catch on and they start to educate themselves and they start to realize what's going on, can you imagine the entire globe doing this all at once? Once this movement gets to that point, it is possible to bring down the central bank system and to build confidence, to make sure that people understand if we get rid of the central bank, or when we get rid of the central bank, you don't have to fear that everything will completely fall apart. You know why? Because we have gold. We have a backstop. We have a way to protect everyone. And everyone should protect themselves by holding silver or gold. That's how you protect your wealth. This is why countries, over generations and generations and generations, have always kept gold. This is why central banks have always kept gold. They know the secret. And once people start to understand and realize this, which is happening right now, this is what the central banks fear the most. And people will start to realize that all this debt, it's meaningless. They created it out of thin air. We owe nobody. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.